I'd like to welcome everybody to the everybody and our guest, to the October DRC meeting. First, we'll establish a quorum. Please call roll.
Mr. Hurley?
Here.
Mr. Landwehr?
Here.
Mr. Schmidt?
Here.
Mr. Sherman?
Here.
Ms. Burrow?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Alderman Barzizza?
Here.
Chairman Bruns?
Here. Thank you. Next item of business is the minutes from the September 26th meeting. Are there any questions or comments about these minutes? If there are none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move. Go ahead. I move that we approve the meeting, the minutes of the previous. I don't have the date on the tip of my tongue. Of the previous Design Review Commission.
Second.
Please call roll.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Ms. Burrow?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Landwehr?
Yes.
Chairman Bruns?
Yes. Minutes are approved, which brings us to the consent agenda. We have one item on tonight's consent agenda, 4A, Rise Biscuits and Donuts. Is there anyone in the audience or on the commission that would like to have this item removed from the consent agenda? Seems not. So I'd like to remind all the commission members that voting on the consent agenda constitutes an acknowledgement that you have read and reviewed this application, the materials of the plan, and the staff report. You've determined that we need no further discussion and presentation of the item is not necessary. So having no one speak up to remove this item, I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Please call roll.
Mr. Landwehr?
Yes.
Mr. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Burrow?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Chairman Bruns?
Yes. Consent agenda is approved. You are free to go. Enjoy your evening. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item number 5, which is internal business for sign ordinance amendments. Staff presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The application before you is a request to amend Chapter 14 of the Municipal Code, which is the sign ordinance. The change before you today is in response to business owners that have contacted the City of Germantown requesting that we provide some type of signage for businesses that are within what we consider small retail and commercial shopping centers. It would allow, this change in the ordinance would allow those centers to have signage up on whatever major road or collector road that they may be addressed from. The staff has done research looking at the sites within the City of Germantown that do not meet the current requirements for what we consider a permanent project directory sign. We've also done research to look at centers smaller centers that have received what is considered a medium project directory sign in order to come up with the standards that are before you today. On the overhead are the proposed amendments, and I'll go through them each so that they will be in the record. We are amending Section 14-34B 10C, which is the permanent project directory sign, and this amendment allows for a planned retail or commercial center having between 30,000 and 70,000 square feet of gross building area, and with no direct sight line from the nearest major or collector road, to have one small retail center project directory sign. Section 1434C 8C, which is also under the permanent project directory sign. This section, I won't read all of this, but this section basically gives you the criteria for that sign. The sign would be 6 feet in height It would be no larger than 36 square feet in size. Also, this sign, this tells you the minimum height of the letters for the sign, and it also gives the DRC some leeway in reviewing this sign and approving changes to that sign. The next section of the ordinance is section 1434D2 and 3, which deals specifically with location, and it also deals with landscaping. The current sign ordinance does not have landscaping requirements for ground-mounted signs. This ordinance change will will require that all ground-mounted signs have landscaping change. So the language has been added to the end of section 2 to allow for that, for the landscaping. And then we've also added it to section 3, so that from this day forward, that is now going to be part of our ordinance requirements. The location of that landscaping and the approval of that landscaping is going to be subject to DRC approval. The next section deals with the location for the small retail and commercial project directory sign, and it also gives the DRC leeway to reduce that setback on the sign or increase it depending on what the circumstances of the sign may be. And then also 1434 D7C, we are adding, again, the landscaping wording to this section of the ordinance. The next section is section 14-34E12C, which deals with content. We're limiting the content of the sign to the name of the shopping center and the names of the tenant within the center. And then section 14-34F1B and 2C deals with the materials and the illumination for small retail or commercial signs. We are basically, in this ordinance, requiring that small retail and commercial center signs not be illuminated by internal illumination. They can only be illuminated by external lighting, and that lighting must be approved by DRC. And if you choose, you can approve a sign that is internally illuminated, but it would be something that comes to the DRC for review and approval. And lastly, this is a medium project directory sign, one that you approved in 2015 for the Germantown Plaza. This is just to show you what the sign would look like for the small retail and commercial centers, to give you an idea of what the height of the sign and the breadth of the sign. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I do have a couple of questions. Is anybody else?
Go ahead.
All signs, as any sign, is approved by DRC, even with the amendment changes.
Yes.
In the research, how many shopping centers within the 30,000, pardon me, to 70,000 were identified to qualify for this type of sign?
There is one existing, there is one possible property that could be developed as a small shopping center that does not have direct frontage on a major road and would come before you to ask for that type of signage.
Okay. So very specific.
Very specific.
As written. Very good. No limit to the amount of tenants on the sign, as long as they qualify by not being visible.
There is no limit to the amount of tenants on the sign, but the limit is going to be granted basically by the design of the sign. You're limited to 36 square feet, so how many you can fit into that 36 square feet would be the tenant's determination or the property owner's determination.
Very good. And as written, I think if they're not viewed from the major road, that number has already been dictated to be, say, less than 6 in the cases that I'm thinking of.
Well, keep in mind, in some centers such as the Forest Hill or Crowlight Plaza Center, most of those tenants are not viewed from the road. So it's going to be the landlord or the property owner that determines who goes on that sign. That is not staff making that determination. So if you've got 10 tenants in a center, but you only have space for 6 people on a sign, then that's going to be their determination to decide who is on that sign.
And get properly represented, so that would be dictated by letter height and everything else.
Yes.
If you had 10 tenants, it would be
Yes.
worthless, in a sense, or unviewable while passing by. I'll
Yes.
say it that way, but perhaps be better. Further questions from commission members?
Well, that was going to be my question. How many 3-inch high, names of tenants are going to fit on that sign? You don't want it to look, too congested. But I think also having the name of the center on the sign at least is an identifier for a store that's going to say, hey, look, I'm in this center. My name may not appear on the sign, but at least you know where to turn in. And like you said, maybe it's the landlord that dictates who gets on the sign and who doesn't based on how close they are to the road, or whether or not their actual placard or tenant sign above the door is visible from the road. And so I think you kind of asked the same question.
Sure. And along those lines, if we determine that they've attempted to put too many tenants on the sign and find the sign to be unattractive, do we have that ability to ask for less tenants?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Those are the end of my questions. This would be reading one, correct? Do we vote on this as we would a normal agenda item?
Yes, you would.
Okay. I know we have a guest, but if you'd like to add any further, please step forward and yes, sir. Name and address, please, for the record.
Dick Like, 8643 Poplar Pike, Germantown. This is regarding, my request came in regarding a shopping center. We have a 33,000 feet on the corner of Forest Hill and Village Shops. And the predicament that we got into there over a period of time when my shopping center was approved, we actually have 10 more feet of green space between the curb and our beginning of our parking lot than the Marshall's store, which sort of blocks us south of us facing on Poplar. And then the Marshall store is also further closer to the curb than our facility is. And then in addition to that, we have our signage on our building is quite far from the curb, and also the shopping center face is quite far from the curb. And along Forest Hill, we have the church and the house, old houses that are there, and trees. And if you're going down Forest Hill, the only way you would see what's in there is you'd have to know when to glance right or left down a slot there to see what was in there. And even then, the signs are so small on the buildings for that distance, it's just very tough. And we just feel like we've got to have some way to draw people to know that, for instance, ATC Fitness has 10,000 square feet there, and you have Crye-Leike, we have probably 8,000 feet, State Farm, Maison Jolie. Some of these places, there's just no way to really see that who's there. You can look in there and see there's a building, but you can't determine what's there.
Mr. Lack, how many tenants do you have overall in the shopping center?
Probably no more than 7, I'd say. I'd
So
have to look
would
at it again. Got Crye-Leike, State Farm, maybe Realty Title, that's 3 in one building. ATC Fitness, 2 other tenants, 6 maybe. Yeah.
Thank you.
You just can't see it as so far back from the street. Both village.
Can you tell us what year the building, your center was built?
It was built probably about 8 years ago, I'm thinking, 8 or so. And it's
As compared to the bank and Marshall's, what years were they built?
the bank would have been after we were built. The bank on the corner you're saying there, yeah, that was after.
And what's their distance from the curb? Do you have any idea?
Their distance from the curb is a lot closer than ours. Plus they have, I guess they don't have any vegetation or any other buildings in front of them.
So the question is then,
8 years ago, why was there such a huge setback for your?
That's what was approved here in Germantown. That's what we came for approval, and that's what we were approved. It sort of gave us a little bit of a odd situation for us to be actually set further back than Marshall's, which is certainly a much larger facility directly to our south. And there's actually no, on that side of Marshall's building, there's no windows or anything looking out on Forest Hill, where we actually have storefront, but we're further back, and makes it difficult to see us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question then.
Yes, sir.
Were you there, was your center built before or after the village shops at Forest Hill?
It was built after.
After?
Right.
Okay.
Where Marshall's is, after all that.
Right.
Yeah, all that's been in there before us. Yes, sir.
Right.
We took a site that had been the old Baptist church there, that was owned by.
Right, it's a daycare now, I believe.
Pardon me?
It was a daycare center, I don't know what they're doing
It still
now.
is, I think.
Is it?
And then there's a house in there also on the corner. So we actually had to take an L site behind all those facilities to build the shopping center.
Okay.
And that may have led to setbacks and all that, I'm sure.
Pardon me?
When building, I'm sure that would have led to setbacks and all that. I'm just trying to picture the bank setback and the Marshalls. Nonetheless, the point of the story is view sightlines to your mall there, or your facility. So there's very few, so.
Very little sight available to the buildings, except looking through channels, and then it's a long distance.
You can't see through there unless you're going through that little drive to get in
No
there.
question, no question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Well, good.
that's
Anything
what
further?
brought it up.
Oh, pardon me, sir.
Thank you. No, that's fine.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Any other comments or questions for staff or Mr. Like? Hearing none, please call roll. Or, not, I'm sorry. We'll do this in the wrong order. Let's do a motion.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Alderman. Maybe a
I'll second it.
Thank you. Now we'll do a vote.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Burrow?
Yes.
Mr. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Landwehr?
Yes.
Alderman Barzizza?
Yes.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Chairman Bruns?
Yes. Reading one is approved. So thank you all. Is there any new or old business to be discussed? Cameron leaned back, so that would be no. Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.